Welcome to Mission to Inspire, where we share life experiences in our careers, personal lives, society, culture, religion, finance, family, and much more. Meet your host, Shola Ajibade, as she takes you on a ride to fuel your inspiration.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to Mission to Inspire. My name is Shola, and I've got our wonderful guest here with us today. His name is Danny Brassell. Hi, Danny. How are you?
Fantastic, Shola. Thank you so much for having me. More importantly, thanks for spreading joy around the world.
Thank you. Thank you for coming on our show. Thank you so much. So Danny is a highly sought after speaker. He's a trainer. He's a coach. He has also authored 16 books, including his latest one, which is Leadership Begins with Motivation. So his mission is to bring joy back into education, and he's helping parents transform their struggling and reluctant readers into more passionate and proficient readers. So that's Danny in a nutshell. Oh yeah, I forgot. There's something else he does. He also shows business owners, entrepreneurs, and executives how to increase their income, freedom, and impact by creating engaging presentation. So that's Danny in a nutshell. So before we go into the interview, I'm going to ask you a few questions just to know you a little bit more. It's this and that question. So are you ready?
I'm ready.
Okay, right. So I know you write a lot. So actual, physical, hard copy books or ebooks?
I'm old school, so I like hard copy books.
Okay. All right, then. Are you a morning person or a night owl?
I'm definitely an early bird. My wife's the night owl. She's usually going to bed when I'm getting up.
Well, that's marriage. You have to mix. You can't be the same.
Yeah.
Fiction or non-fiction?
I like nonfiction. I prefer.
Okay, right. So are your books around non-fiction? I know they're mostly education.
Yeah, the books I've written have all been nonfiction, but I really should write some fiction books. The book I'm writing right now is the last book I wrote was Leadership Begins with Motivation, which is basically it's kind of an homage to Paul Harvey. When I was a kid, I used to listen to Paul Harvey on the radio every day. He'd come on at 12:15. He'd say, "I'm Paul Harvey," with the rest of the story, and he'd tell you a story for about 5 minutes, and you're trying to figure out who's he talking about or what's the company. And so when I was a teacher, I was the first teacher in my school never to have any tardy students, and it's because the students always wanted to hear. When I would always start class by reading a Paul Harvey story, but a lot of those stories are about people like Sears Roebuck. Well, kids today don't know who Sears and Roebuck are. And so the reason I wrote Leadership Begins with Motivation was to update it with more contemporary examples. So it has, like Michael Jordan and Elon Musk and Jeff Bezos. But this was the interesting thing, Shola. After I wrote the book, I read it, and completely unintentionally, so many of the examples I created in that book are of white male Americans. And it was weird to me. And so the book I'm writing right now is the same type of book, but most of the examples are of minorities, females, and international examples, because I think people need to hear about all these inspiring stories all over the place. And I'm actually having a lot of fun. I'm learning so much, and it's interesting. It's gotten me to open up my viewpoint a little bit, because I realized, wow, there's a lot of stories that just aren't told. And I don't think people are intentionally not telling them, but they're not told. And people need to hear those stories so that they can see inspiration from different places. And so I'm enjoying it. That's a very long answer to your short question.
Good. So next one, coffee or tea?
Coffee.
Okay. Beach vacation or mountain retreat?
I live in the mountains, so beach vacation.
Okay. Right. I think I know this one, but I'll ask you anyway. Formal attire or casual wear?
Casual wear.
I'm wrong then. I always see.
I dressed up for you, Shola. This is out of respect for you. Usually I'm just in a coffee stained tank top. Usually.
Okay. Indoor activities or outdoor adventures?
Well, I'd like to say I prefer outdoor activities, but I'm kind of inside all the time, so I have to be honest and tell you indoor activities. My wife, she forced me to realize long ago that I'm just a white guy. She's like, "Why are you out in the sun all the time? You're just getting skin cancer." And so she's made me more of an indoor person.
Oh my goodness. Wow, that's hilarious. Dogs or cats? Which of the
Dogs.
pets would you prefer? Okay. Right. I'm a little bit confused on this one because you do both. Writing or public speaking?
Oh, well, yeah, that's tough, but I'm going to say public speaking is what I prefer. Writing, I like to have written something. The process of writing is very painful.
Okay. Right. Okay, thank you. That's all the questions on Can We
I love that. That was great, Shola. Thank you.
Oh my God. Oh, actually, there's one more. Action movies or romantic comedies?
Romantic comedies.
Okay, right. Okay.
There's not many good ones, though. Anything with Sandra Bullock is good.
Yeah. The good actor. So the topic we are discussing today is motivation, the key to effective leadership. It's actually based around your latest book anyway. So that's what we're discussing today. So would you like to tell us a little bit more about yourself? I've done a short intro, but you might want to add a few things.
Well, you talked about a lot of it, Shola. So basically, like you said, my mission is I'm on a mission to bring joy back into education and the workplace. And I do that in 4 different ways. First of all, I speak all around the world, over 100 dates a year, to audiences from schools to corporations to nonprofit companies. Secondly, I have the world's top reading engagement program online, which basically shows parents in 5 minutes a day over the course of 2 months how to get their kids to read more, read better, and most importantly, to love reading. Because I find that schools do an adequate job of teaching kids how to read. But the question I always ask people is, well, what good is it teaching a kid how to read if they never want to read? I teach kids why to read, because I've never had to tell a kid go watch TV. I've never had to tell a kid go play a video game, and I never want to have to tell a kid go read. I want them to choose to do it because they love it for its own sake. Third, I work, and you had mentioned this, I work with entrepreneurs, executives, anybody interested in using public speaking to broaden their audience, to get their audience to take what I call the next step, whether that's to purchase your product or to donate to your cause, or really even just to invest in your idea. And then finally, the last thing I've been doing, which I'm really passionate about, is because of the pandemic, I was able to meet a wonderful gentleman from Ireland called Diarmuid Hudner, who has this program called Cyber Smarties. And he and I found that both of us are in the same business. How do we develop better habits in human beings? And so Cyber Smarties is a social media platform for kids ages 5 to 12 that teaches them how to use social media in a positive way. So for example, if I typed a message, Shola, I think you're ugly, it won't let me send the message. Instead, you get a pop-up that says, that's not a nice thing to say to Shola. Here's some nicer things to say. Wow. Yeah, basically, the funny thing is it frustrates kids that it slows them down, that it won't let them send the message, that within 3 days, they are no longer sending negative messages. And basically, the program has completely eliminated cyberbullying in Ireland. Now we're in India, we're in New Zealand, we're in the UAE, we're in Turkey, and I'm in charge of spreading it across the United States, Canada, and Mexico here in North America. And so I'm very excited about that. And so I, like you, I have lots of different pots on the stove. I'm very interested and curious. And that's what drew me to you, is you're a person that's just curious, trying to make the world a little bit better place however you can. And I really am very sincere when I say what you're doing is very important, Shola. There's a lot of people out there that are struggling. The last couple of years have been very trying on a lot of people, and we have no idea how trying they were for a lot of people. And so by what you do, providing a little bit of a positive spark, you have no idea the impact that you're having. So I salute you for that.
Oh, thank you so much for that feedback. Thank you. So let's talk about your books. You've written 16. Wow.
They're very short. They're not very long. I don't think, that's the thing. Ken Blanchard, who's a wonderful speaker, and he's written several books, but he said something which really meant a lot to me. He said, why write one 800-page book that nobody will read when you could write 8 100-page books that people will read? Mm-hmm. And he's right about that, especially when I'm working with leaders. I call them airplane books. Is the book like about 125 to 150 pages, a perfect book that I can read on a flight from Orlando to Denver or something like that. And I think that's much more powerful. It's why I told you that I prefer nonfiction. The problem is, when I read fiction, it's great. Like John Grisham is one of my favorite authors. The reason I love John Grisham is because every chapter is about 6 pages long. And so, it's 10 o'clock at night. I want to finish. I want to just put the book down, but it said the chapter ends. Well, then he found the knife. So I'm like, well, I'll read one more chapter because it's short, but then the next chapter is about something totally different. And all of a sudden it's 2 a.m. and I finished the book because the chapters were short. I told you earlier that I prefer nonfiction. The problem is I'll read a presidential biography like, The Rise of Theodore Roosevelt by Edmund Morris. And it's like chapter 1, page 1, chapter 2, page 118. I'm like, oh, it takes forever. It drives me nuts. So so another one of the things I have one of the top reading clubs online called lazyreaders.com, and on lazyreaders.com it's a free site, anybody can subscribe. Every month I provide 10 new book recommendations, 3 or 4 adult level, 3 or 4 young adult level, and 3 or 4 children's level books, all under 250 pages, so you have something you can read when you're stuck in a boring meeting or you're at the doctor's office. I've worked a lot with, you'd mentioned earlier with struggling, reluctant readers. That's code for boys. Boys have a tougher time learning how to read than girls. Girls mature much quicker than boys. And there's a lot of reasons I think boys struggle at an early age. One of them, though, is I look at these books and they're really long. And I'm like, why not get the kid reading like Sports Illustrated, like short articles? Or, I used to use hip hop lyrics with a lot of my students, and they're like, oh, and they're reading it. And I'm like, this is great. That's what we're trying to do. We're trying to get them interested. The research is very clear about this, Shola. It doesn't matter what you read. What matters is how much you read. It doesn't matter if you're reading James Joyce or James and the Giant Peach. People who read more read better, but reading is not confined to Dostoevsky, a 900-page Russian novel. That's not the only type. So again, a very long answer to your short question. Yeah, I write short books. I like books that are short. A book I can read on the toilet.
Impressive. Oh my goodness. Thank you for answering that question. So, your joy is to bring back education. So how do you do that? How do you?
Well, I tell people to surround themselves with positives. And so like the stories that I love to share with people are always positive stories. I was watching a horrible show on TV last week called The News, and it totally depressed me. Stop watching negative things. Like one of my favorite speakers, he's passed on, but he was wonderful, Keith Harrell. He used to talk about how attitude is everything. And he had a saying that I loved. A lot of people say garbage in, garbage out, and that's not true. Garbage in, garbage stays. People tell you negative things enough, you start to believe them. That's the negative. The positive, people tell you things that are positive about you, you start to believe those as well. And that's what I used to really, I always worked in the inner city in South Central Los Angeles. And a lot of my kids came from some very negative environments. And really my job, I saw every single day, is how do I get these kids to start believing in themselves? I used to always tell the kids, I'm like, you know what? Sometimes you need somebody else to believe in you before you believe in yourself. I believe in all of you. They only give me the best and the brightest. Now let's go make the world a better place. You tell that enough to a kid, they start believing it. And so I think that's really important. So when you're talking about joy, I know so many people, they'll sit there and they'll watch like cable news all the time and they're angry. And I'm like, you're angry because you're watching cable news, which is designed to spark a negative reaction, a very strong reaction. Stop doing that. Watch. My wife is wonderful. She only watches comedies. She's like, I don't want to watch the news. It's great. I love that about her. Like all these people are concerned about news. I have an uncle who watches the news 24 hours a day. And I asked him recently, I'm like, has President Biden consulted with you? He's like, what do you mean? I'm like, well, you watch the news all the time. You're so informed. Hasn't the president consulted with you? He's like, no. I'm like, exactly. He doesn't care. So why do you care? Like, worry about things that are within your control. I can't control you. I mean, I guess I'm putting it to, yes, you should be informed. I mean, you should be empathetic. But if there's an earthquake halfway around the world, I mean, why are you going to let that depress you? I mean, you can't do anything about that. If there's something you can do, I mean, if you can do something about it, do something about it. But I think that the reason most people are losing joy is because they're influenced by the 2% of the population that are either really extreme this way or really extreme this way. They love to yell and shout. And I had a teacher when I was in second grade, and I'll never forget what she said. She said, when you're yelling, it usually means you're losing your argument. And I always remembered that.
Oh my goodness. Oh God. Okay. So we know you assist business owners, entrepreneurs, and executives in reaching their new heights of success. Can you elaborate on that?
Well, I help people create powerful presentations. It just depends on what they want to do. So, and I've been blessed to work with some pretty big people. Actually, after this interview, I'm working with a guy who's climbed the 7 summits of the earth. Pretty fascinating person. I've worked with Olympic gold medalists. I've worked with Fortune 50 CEOs. And really what I do with them is one of two things. Either we create a powerful presentation, which I show them a format. If you do this, you'll have a better success ratio of getting your audience to take the next step, is what I always call it. And then, I've heard lots of people, some people want, like, I've heard people call it a signature talk. I always called it a stump speech, because before I was a teacher, I used to be a journalist. And if you cover like a presidential candidate, they give the same speech like 20 times a day, and they call that a stump speech. And so basically what a stump speech is, or a signature talk, or whatever you want to call it, is how do you introduce yourself to the world, and how do you get the world interested in taking the next step with you, whether that's to enroll in your newsletter or whatever, or to purchase your product, things like that. There's simple ways to do that. And I teach it a little bit differently than I've seen some other people teach it, because there's a lot of I've had great speech instructors. One of my favorites is Pat Quinn, is a good friend. I think he's probably the best speaker coach on the planet. The problem I have with the way this is being taught to a lot of people is, I was recently a judge at a speaking competition, Shola, and there were over 1,300 speakers, and not a single one of them gave a funny speech. They were all sad talks, and it was depressing. And I'll tell you why I have a problem with that. Now, I understand that the sob story sells. Yeah, I get that. There's plenty of research to prove that. But I have a problem with it. And I'll give you 3 reasons. First of all, the world just went through a global pandemic. I think a lot of people have suffered, and I don't think people need to hear sad stories right now. I think people need to hear some optimism and some hope. And so that's the first reason I don't like teaching people to give a sad story. Second of all, do you really want to repeat that same sad story 1,000 times? I mean, I have a friend whose daughter was killed in a school shooting, and so he gives that talk all the time. You have to be a stronger person than me, Shola, to talk about the worst moment of your life, every single day. Now, this third one, this is where people get angry with me, and I apologize, but here's why I really have a problem with people telling the sad talk all the time.
Mhm.
I like to get people to laugh and just smile. And there's something admirable about that. I can tell the same joke again and again, and my intention is to get you to smile.
Mhm. Mhm.
When you tell the same sad talk again and again, I think after the 20th time you've told it, those are crocodile tears. I think you're completely inauthentic. I think you've completely lost the authenticity. Now, that's me, and people always yell at me about that. But I see it all the time. I see these salespeople, they're like, oh, daddy touched me, and now buy my product. It's very insincere to me. And I you know what? It's the same way when I was a teacher. I used to tell my kindergartners, the average adult laughs 15 times a day. The average kindergartner laughs 300 times a day. Your job is to make me laugh 315 times a day. And the kids are, huh? I'm like, kids, you got the rest of your lives to be miserable. I want us laughing this year. Let's enjoy ourselves. Life is too short. I see so many. I don't want to surround myself with serious people. And so, again, long answer to your short question. When I'm working with people on creating their talks, we're going to make an awesome talk, but it's also going to be a happy talk, because I can't stand hearing these sad talks all the time. It's all right every now and then, and don't get me wrong. I mean, there's some talks that they're sad, but they're inspirational, and that's totally different. If you overcome something, that's great. But I just don't like what I hear so many people talking about the worst moment in the, wow, I'm all alone in the room. We have nothing to eat.
I think it's part of their elevation speech, isn't it?
What's that?
I think it's part of the elevation speech when they want to talk. That's one very important part of the speech, to get people in that mood to want to listen.
It's true. I mean, you're right, Shola. I mean, I make fun of it. Because I've heard, one of my jokes that I say is, you ever notice that most successful people never grew up middle class? It's always the same speech. They're like, well, I was homeless living under a bridge, and a truck went over the bridge and it hit a pothole, and a book fell out and it hit me on the head and it woke me up. And I didn't have anything to do because I was homeless. And so I started reading the book, and the book was about how to make money in real estate with no money down. And it kind of made sense. And so I was able to purchase a house with no money down. And then I bought 5 more houses. And then my other homeless friends started asking, hey, could you coach me on how to invest in real estate with no money? So that's why I started coaching my homeless buddies. And now I coach, it's the same story. I've heard so many people, I grew up in my garage. Really? You grew up in a garage? How many people have grown up in a garage? I've heard that so many times. Or, I wash dishes in my bathtub. Why? Why would a person wash dishes in you don't have a sink? And I'm being facetious. A lot of these people, they're people I respect. But the story's always the same. Oh, I was dying and I thought to myself, have I lived? Have I loved? Have I learned? Sorry.
God, you got me there. You know what? I laugh so much because I'm a property investor myself. And that story, I don't tell that story anyway, because that's not my story, but I've heard it 100 times over. So
yeah. Well, I love speakers. So I watch like 10 speakers a day. I used to be part of an organization. It was a bunch of speakers, and that was always our inside joke is, oh, did you tell the starfish story? Because there's some stories that you hear speakers, and I'm like, I can tell you the 30 other people that use that story, like the starfish story is the person that's the little kids throwing in a starfish one at a time. There's thousands of starfish on the sand, and the person's like, you're not making a difference. There's thousands. He's like, well, it makes a difference to this one. You know, I've heard that story. They're original, man. I'm sorry.
I laughed my ribs out anyway. Okay, so I haven't talked about this. How does understanding, oh my God, you've made me really laugh today.
Well, good. That's my goal.
So how does understanding the role of motivation in leadership, especially, empower individuals like ourselves to become more effective leaders?
Yeah, well, I mean, I've read about lots of leaders, and there's plenty of readers that don't become necessarily effective leaders, but I have never read about an effective leader who's not also an avid reader. And
Yeah.
so really, this is great advice for anybody listening to the podcast right now, is that it doesn't matter where you're born. If you have a library card, now you just have to be on the internet. You have access to amazing information to inform you. I mean, if you Michael Jordan became a better basketball player by studying the best basketball players. You know, you look at, and this is what I love about readers. Like, they're always, it doesn't matter what the field is. So I'm a big basketball fan. So LeBron James, I could have kissed him before the NBA Finals when he was playing for the Miami Heat. They showed him in the locker room, and he was reading The Hunger Games by Suzanne Collins. I'm like, wow, I could have kissed him. You just did more to get kids excited about reading than I'll ever be able to do, because all the kids saw, oh, LeBron James, that's what he does. Presidents, a lot of people forget that President Kennedy was asked a question by a journalist in his presidency. He said, the question was, well, what are you reading, Mr. President? And President Kennedy said, oh, I'm reading this really cool spy book about this secret agent named James Bond. Well, MGM heard that answer. They bought the rights to the James Bond books, and that's why we have James Bond movies, was because President Kennedy said that. You look at military leaders like General Schwarzkopf, they said could read in 4 languages and quote Shakespeare voraciously. Business leaders, Elon Musk, one of the wealthiest people in the world. Warren Buffett, one of the wealthiest people in the world. These people spend all their days reading all the time. And so, you know, if you really want to be an effective leader, it begins with motivation, and motivation comes from reading about people that you want to be like. And that's why, and again, I work with lots of CEOs. A lot of people don't know this. Over half of the Fortune 500 CEOs are dyslexic, and dyslexics tend to process information better with their ears. And so being read aloud to is just as good as reading on your own. So I always tell these CEOs, I'm like, well, listen to Audible books all the time. And that's what they'll do. And so if you really want to become a more effective leader, you need to become a more avid reader.
Right. Thank you for that. So we need to read more, basically. Okay. So in what ways can leaders harness their own motivation to inspire and motivate their teams or people around them?
Yeah, so one of the things I was going to give everybody in your audience as a thank you for bearing with me and listening to me is when you go to freegiftfromdanny.com, again, freegiftfromdanny.com, I'm going to give everybody a copy of my book, Read, Lead, and Succeed. This is a book I wrote for a school principal who was trying to keep his faculty positively engaged. So I said, okay, let me write you a book. And so every week I give you a concept, an inspirational quote, an inspirational story, a book recommendation on a book you should read, but you're probably too lazy because you're an adult. So I also give you a children's picture book recommendation, demonstrates the same concept. You read that in 5 minutes. And so now I'm so happy to see all these CEOs starting off meetings with Dr. Seuss books or whatever, because there's wisdom in a lot of those children's books. Again, it doesn't matter what you read. What matters is how much you read. You can find inspiration in lots of different things. I'm also going to give everybody access to a 5-day reading challenge I did last summer with about 700 parents worldwide, where every day for an hour, you have access to me giving you all kinds of ideas on how to get kids to read more, read better, and most importantly, to love reading. You get all of that at freegiftfromdanny.com. Those are my thank yous to you and your audience, Shola.
Oh, thank you so much. So we can have that free gift. So I'm going to put the, is it the web address in the description?
Great. Free gift from Danny.com. Thank
Yeah.
you.
Okay, great. Thank you for the free gift. Have you got any real stories or real life examples of leaders or yourself who have successfully utilized motivation as
Here,
a
I'm going
guiding
to
factor?
I'm going to read to you one of my little stories from my book. Here's
Okay,
this Leadership Begins with Motivation.
right.
On the morning of January 17th, 1977, Gary Gilmore, in a plain t-shirt, strapped into a chair with a bag over his head, awaited a firing squad of 5 law enforcement officers to execute him at the state prison in Draper, Utah. Convicted of murdering a gas station employee and motel manager in Utah the year before, Gilmore would be the first person in the United States to be executed in nearly a decade. Shortly before his execution, prison officials asked Gilmore if he had any last words. Neither he nor anyone else that day would know the impact of those words. Over 10 years later, in 1988, Dan Whedon, an advertising executive who co-founded the Whedon and Kennedy Agency in Portland, Oregon, made something of a morbid pitch to a struggling fashion company. He recalled the inmate's final words and used a slight variation for his pitch, and seemingly everyone hated his idea for the company's new slogan. Trust me on this one, Whedon implored the company's co-founder. And the co-founder, his company, and the public have not looked back since. Co-founder's name was Phil Knight. The struggling brand he co-founded was a shoe company called Nike. And advertising executive Dan Whedon slightly altered death row inmate Gary Gilmore's final words, "Let's do it," into the phrase, "Just do it." So that's all about, are you paying attention to the opportunities around you?
That's it. And there are lots of opportunities around us that we just not pay attention to. That's
Absolutely.
Wow. Thank you. That actually answered my question. Any inspirational advice for us and our listeners out there?
I mean, one of my mentors was Charlie Tremendous Jones. He used to say, "You're the same today as you will be in 5 years, except for 2 things, the people you meet and the books you read." So I always tell people, be wise, surround yourself with people that lift you up, and make sure you're reading all kinds of great books that fill you with inspiration.
Yay. Thank you so much for that word of advice. Thank you so much. And it's great having you on our show today. Thank you for
You're
coming.
awesome, Shola. Keep on doing everything that you're doing. I love your smile.
Thank you. And it's goodbye from us. Till next time on Mission to Inspire. Bye.
Thank you for joining us today on Mission to Inspire. Subscribe if you have not already done so. Like, comment, leave a message. Let's stay connected. Let's jointly inspire the world.